So all we have is a README. Doesn't do us a whole lot of good. Let's make some HTML. We can use touch or we can create it in here, whatever you like to do. If I do that, it's over here now. Also, nice thing in Visual Studio Code, once you have files with lots, or once you have projects with lots of files, which we don't yet, but we will once we get into React, you can also get to them by using a shortcut Command P or Control P and just starting to type the name of the file. You can type any part of the name of the file. Like I'm going to have index.js and index.css as well. So if I just start typing HTML, it's going to autocomplete index.html. Really fast way to not take your hands off the keyboard. I use it all the time. So if I just type HTML, you may have more than one suggestion here. One of them hopefully is simple HTML5 starting point. I'm going to choose that one. And then I get all this. Give your page a title. It's already highlighted. Tatum Tots. And it's going to go ahead and put a style sheet and a JavaScript link in there. We can leave them but change them to index.css and index.js. But we weren't putting our script in the head of the document, were we? We were putting it at the end of the body. Anybody remember why? Why we put the script at the end? Yeah.
Because the page loads and you have to have the JavaScript at the end to catch it.
Yeah, so if you're trying to grab a DOM element from the page and that element hasn't been added to the DOM yet, it hasn't been rendered yet, it's going to explode. So if we move this to the bottom of the body, then we're guaranteed the entire DOM has loaded by then. There are other ways of ensuring that, but that's a really, really easy way. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and put an H1 in here. Why not? Let's see. How do I want to structure this thing? I'm going to have more than just an H1 in my header. I'm going to split this page into like a header section and a main section. I'm going to have some stuff at the top. So HTML5 introduced elements like header and main and footer and stuff like that. So I'm going to use one called header. It just works exactly like a div, which is just a generic block level element. But it's a little more descriptive, so when you're reading the markup, it just makes a little more sense. Also, if I were to make it a div and I wanted to target it with CSS, I'd probably have to say like div ID header or something. Just use a header element. It's easier. So inside my header, I'll make an H1. Tatum Tots. What else am I going to have on the page? I'm probably going to have a form. I know that much. But I'm going to stop there for right this second and just do a little tiny bit more setup here. So this time we're going to use a CSS framework just to give us some shortcuts. Anybody use a CSS framework before, like Bootstrap or Foundation or anything like that, or Material Design? Anybody use anything? Yeah? You've used Material? Or what about you? What have you used? Bootstrap? Okay. Well, guess which one we're going to use? The one that neither of you used before. Not to be mean, but just because that's what I used last time. So I'm going to use Foundation. It's very easy to use. So you want to find it, and I highly recommend keeping this documentation handy. We're going to look stuff up. I'll just look up Foundation CSS. And I will find that it is foundation.zerb.com. Here's docs up here in the upper right. There's Foundation for sites and there's Foundation for emails. We want sites, of course. Welcome to Foundation 6. Oh, there's a nice friendly video. we don't need a lot of complicated setup instructions. We just want the documentation handy. So how do we add it? There's more to Foundation than just CSS. There's also some JavaScript stuff you can add. We're just going to use the CSS. Basically, we want our form to be pretty, and we don't want to have to write a whole bunch of CSS to do it. So we're going to use that. So we just want their style sheet. We could download it and put it in our project, but we could also link to something called a CDN. Anybody used a CDN before? Anybody know what it stands for? Anybody know what it is? It stands for Content Delivery Network, for what it's worth. And what it is basically a highly available, very reliable server that stores some very common files for you to use in your project. So things like Foundation and Bootstrap and so on that are used in many, many projects, there are CDNs that store those. And heck, if you use the version from the CDN in yours and use their URL and don't host it locally, one, you're not using up your bandwidth. Two, if somebody else has already visited another site that used the same CDN and they already have it cached, it's going to use the one that's in their cache so they don't have to download the exact same file again. And some of these libraries are very big. So that can add up, especially if people are getting there from a mobile phone. CDNs tend to be very fast, very reliable. Yes, it does add another point of failure. If they go down but your site doesn't, you will lose something. But frankly, they're likely to be more reliable than you are. So nothing personal. So we're going to get it from a CDN. One that's really easy to remember is CDN.js. CDNJS.com. Search from a whole bunch of libraries with a whole bunch of versions. So let's look for Foundation. First result, the most advanced responsive front-end framework in the world. All right, let's do it. Now, the quick link it gives it here is for the JavaScript, which is not what we want. So just click on the word Foundation there, and it'll give us lots of versions. Heck, some different CDNs as well, potentially. And then a whole bunch of different files. Now, here's the trick. You have to know which one you want. Foundation CSS is what we want, but there's Foundation CSS and Foundation.min.css. The difference? We talked about minification the first day a little bit, but that's where you just take something and make it as small as it can be, take out all the white space. At the expense of readability, it becomes a much smaller file that you can download a lot quicker. And we're not going to read or edit the CSS that they provide. We're just going to use it. So the minified version is perfect for our needs. So just copy this URL for foundation.min.css. Let's add a link to the head of our document. And if you're going to load style sheets from frameworks and libraries and things, put your style sheet, your custom style sheet, last. That way you can override those rules more easily. So right before the link to your style sheet, which doesn't exist yet, let's make another link. Link rel equals style sheet, href equals the URL we just copied for foundation.min.css. I'm going to paste that URL in Slack. I'll also paste a link to the Foundation docs in Slack. Now we're linking to a CSS file and a JavaScript file that don't exist yet, right? So let's make them. Let's make them exist. I'll do it this way this time. Index.css and index.js. I'm not going to put anything in them. But I want to make sure that they're all linked up appropriately before I start writing a bunch of code that just mysteriously doesn't work because I didn't really link it up right. So I need to open this thing in the browser. Here it is. I can tell right away that Foundation worked because I recognize the font. So Foundation just has a bunch of CSS that if you structure your HTML a certain way, you'll just kind of get those styles for free. If you use the same classes they've already defined and so on, then you'll just get their styles. Like they've set a default font for the entire page already. So kind of handy, kind of a pain if you want to override that, but not that bad. So the main thing is knowing what they called their classes and so on. And that's what the documentation's for. So if I look over here in the Dev Tools, if I look at the Network tab, I don't see any errors, so probably they're all there. Let's just look at the Sources tab to be sure. It'll show us all of the files that were loaded for the current page. So we've got index.html, index.js, index.css, and from CDN.js, we've got Foundation. So they all loaded. I have no errors on my console. I linked up my style sheet and my JavaScript correctly. Good. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that much. I can do it from here. Okay, these are the three changes I expected. Add boilerplate, HTML, and Foundation. Sync it up with my remote. Good to go. Questions?